Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jeff. This is Not Just Book Reviews, and I was tagged in a recent tag that was done by the master of disaster himself, Criminale. And this is the birth year book tag, which is as usual, a diabolical concoction of Signor Criminale across the pond. But I thought I would take a crack at it since I was tagged, and I've seen many other tubers doing the tag. I thought I would throw my hat into the ring and sadly show my advanced age. So my birth year was 1968, and if there was ever a year not to be born in, that was the year. It was a pretty tumultuous year globally, especially in the United States. We saw the assassination of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King in the same year. We saw the splitting of the Democratic Party and the riots in Chicago as the party split from far left to moderate left. The Tet Offensive happened in Vietnam, which effectively ended America's chance to win that war. And in Paris were the student riots that were huge. So 68 was, if it wasn't 2022 and we haven't gone through such incredibly tumultuous years recently, I would say it was a hell of a year. But I think the pandemic has kind of one-upped a lot of this. But still, it was an incredibly tumultuous year to be born. So anyway, I will proceed with the year of my birth, book tag. So question one, have you read any books published in the year you were born? And as a matter of fact, I have two of them. So 2001, A Space Odyssey, was written by Arthur C. Clarke. And it was written at the same time that Stanley Kubrick and Clarke were working on 2001. So obviously everyone knows it's Clarke's story, and he co-wrote the screenplay with Stanley Kubrick for 2001. He lived in I believe the Chelsea Hotel in New York while he was working on the movie with Stanley. And he was writing the book, the novelized version of it, while they were making the movie. So the novel departs from the book in choice of planet. So in the novel, the big brother is actually on Iapetus or Japetus, which is a moon of Saturn. And in the film, they chose Jupiter. So there's a little bit of a retcon. When Clarke wrote 2010, Odyssey 2, which is a fantastic novel, by the way, a really good hard sci-fi novel. He kind of retcons his own novel universe to coincide with the movie. And in 2010, they are at Jupiter, and the whole plot revolves around what happens in Jupiter orbit. So it's kind of an interesting factoid. The only other book I read that year was A Wizard of Earthsea, which was also released in 1968. Of the two, I enjoy Ursula K. Le Guin, and the Earthsea trilogy is one that I did enjoy as a youth, and have plans on reading it very soon. I'd like to revisit it again because I just have memories of it it was very good. But 2001 was an amazing novel, and I didn't get to share it in my the Astounding Science Fiction book tag. But 2001, the novel definitely had an impact on me as a reader before the film, and mostly the period when Bowman was by himself later on during the voyage, when Poole had died, and there were these chapters where he was cycling through music. And there became a point where he couldn't listen to the human voice anymore. And so he wound up ending up listening to Bach and a little Mozart as the music out in the Discovery as he was heading towards Saturn on the final leg. And I remember how haunting that was for me, as well as this killer AI. It was something that, I probably read it when I was maybe in my mid-teens. And I'd never read anything that chilling before. In some ways, it's a bit of a horror movie in space as well as a wonderful science fiction odyssey. So in that way, it had a massive impact on me. So it's, one of my favorite novels and one of my favorite movies. And this is kind of a 2-for-1 as we get to the later questions. The second question is, have you read any books published in the year you turned 18? And that would be 1986. And so I'll give you a top 5, and then I'll give you my favorite. So Red Storm Rising by Tom Clancy came out in '86. Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow. Count Zero, William Gibson's follow-up to Neuromancer, It by Stephen King, and the graphic novel The Dark Knight Returns. So those are kind of my top five of that year. But I have to put Red Storm Rising at the top because I'm a big Tom Clancy fan. His primary Jack Ryan books I'm a big fan of. Red Storm Rising is not a Jack Ryan book, but it's a book that he wrote with Larry Bond. And Larry Bond and he were big war gamers before, I think, computer war gamers, really. They were paper and pencil war gamers. And I think they collaborated on one called Harpoon. And I think Larry Bond was a big part of Red Storm Rising, although his name wasn't in the title. I think Clancy, gave him some of the proceeds from it. But it's basically the U.S. and the USSR having a non-nuclear interaction, and the war that takes place in the North Atlantic with the Soviet and U.S. forces, and also the land war in Europe, tanks and planes and helicopters. And it's fantastic. I mean, it's just classic Clancy. It was the second novel. It released after The Hunt for Red October. And it's got his, it's classic techno thriller where he knows more than, people are supposed to know who write that kind of thing. I think he had a few run-ins with the U.S. military and the U.S. intelligence services at some point when he was releasing some of these books. And they pulled him in and they wanted to know where he got all this information. And I think he revealed to them that this stuff was out there, unbeknownst to some of the armed forces, that it was available to get for the public, right? So anyway, Red Storm Rising, my top book for my 18th year. So the next question is, of the last 10 books you read, how many were published before you were born? So of the last 10 books I read, 4 of them were published before I was born. On Her Majesty's Secret Service by Ian Fleming, You Only Live Twice by Ian Fleming, Man with the Golden Gun. And these were all published in the 60s, just before I was born. And War and Peace, which was published in 1860s, I think. It was published. So those were the 4. Do I prefer them to newer books is the question. And I think that there's so much that I haven't read that has achieved classic status in the 1800s, the 20th century. Whereas in contemporary books, for some reason I'm not drawn to them. And obviously the classics of the decade and our contemporary time haven't been really ironed out yet. So I find myself, if a contemporary book appeals to me, I'll go for it. But I find myself wanting to go back and read the books that have been highly touted and that have made the journey in taste and temperament of all these years that are still with us today. I want to read all of Charles Dickens. I want to finish Ian Fleming, So the contemporary books that come out, I tend to not be as interested in them. So I think I prefer books from an older time. Not necessarily before I was born, but probably 20th century and 19th century as well. So favorite movie from your birth year. So there were 2 of my favorite movies in my birth year, 2001: Space Odyssey and Planet of the Apes. There are also Where Eagles Dare, which is a great World War II adventure movie. The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster, which is an incredible movie. And George Romero's Night of the Living Dead was also released in 1968, which is the classic still to this day. So I think 2001, Planet of the Apes, I mean, you have to go 2001. So it's probably my favorite movie. It's just a masterpiece. And it took me a while to really grow to love it because I came from the novel. I did an in-depth podcast where I went through the movie scene by scene and talked about what I liked about it. I'll link that in the description box, part of my podcast that I used to have back in the day. But 2001: A Space Odyssey wins hands down. And the last question is, what's your favorite movie from the year you turned 18 and why? So again, we're talking about 1986. And there are 3 movies that are at the top. There's Manhunter by Michael Mann, Platoon by Oliver Stone, and Aliens by James Cameron. So it's a tough one to pick a favorite out of those. I mean, I love Manhunter. It's probably my favorite Michael Mann movie. It's really terrific serial killer thriller film starring William Peterson, directed by Michael Mann. Really amazing movie. And Oliver Stone's Platoon, arguably one of his best films. I mean, just an incredibly powerful movie. drawn from his experiences in Vietnam. But I think Aliens has to take the cake. I mean, I still prefer Ridley Scott's Alien over Aliens if I'm going to compare the two. But Aliens is like a perfect Hollywood blockbuster. From first shot to last, I think it's almost a perfect movie. Yeah, and it just it kind of has to top the other two, and it's still a favorite of mine. I don't really like any of the other Alien movies. I only really like Ridley Scott's Alien and Cameron's Aliens. I don't like Fincher's Alien 3. I don't like anything else that's happened in the Alien universe in any way, or the crossover with the Predator universe. Don't get me started. But yeah, so Aliens will take the cake. And yeah, so that's it for the year of my birth tag. Very cool tag by Mr. Criminale. So glad to be part of it. So I can think of two folks to tag that I think maybe haven't done it yet, or maybe they have, I don't know. But Pax Panic, I will tag you if you're watching. And I'll also tag Owen Edwards. Pax Panic and Owen Edwards, you're tagged. So thanks for watching.